The Birthday of Eternity, a Comfort and Company mystery, written by A.D. Price, narrated by Elizabeth Schmidt. Chapter 1, Devika, excerpt from Survival, My Journey to Enlightenment, Kobo Press, 1948. Death, as a concept, bubbles up often in my current existence, but in my previous life, I did my best to keep the topic at bay, to push down my fears and ignore any pain. Months after the war's end, I was still rationing my sadness, still offering fake smiles and unearned laughs. That began to change with the death of my grandmother. Days before, she had taken a bad fall, and her recovery had been fitful. I dropped by the hospital once or twice, but on that last Sunday I canceled my planned visit and attended one of my husband's archery competitions instead. She passed during the night. Grandma had always been the kind, constant in my life, more giving than my mother, and her departure from this world was a blow to my defenses. Its full impact, however, my shame especially, didn't hit me until later. Even then, as I first stood by her open grave under that scorching sun, dry martinis in ice-cold glasses were all I was thinking about. In her will, Grandma instructed she be buried at Forest Lawn in the Everlasting Love section next to her beloved husband, my grandpa. He had succumbed to a stroke a few years earlier, and his demise rendered Grandma spiritually unbalanced, or, as she put it, without him by her side, her life had no joy. At the time, I didn't associate Grandma's spiritual imbalance with a literal imbalance, the type of vertigo that caused her to misjudge a step, take a spill, and break her hip. But the connection seems obvious to me now. I also see now the deep imprint that my grandparents' long and loving marriage left on my psyche. My parents' marriage was fragile, and my own romances were flops. But Grandma and Grandpa's bond truly was everlasting, in life and beyond. Who doesn't yearn for that? No doubt that if my native Californian grandma had been in charge of the matter, her burial would have taken place on a rainy dawn in winter. As it turned out, however, the fates preferred a cloudless afternoon in July. The night before, a Santa Ana wind had blown in, delivering a day of gusts so hot and dry they all but set fire to the lungs. The service at the wee Kirk o' the Heather Church had been reasonably well attended, but most of the mourners, including my husband, skipped the burial. While immaculate and stubbornly green, the lawn the cemetery was famous for had absorbed the wind's heat, making standing graveside more hellish than heavenly. The minister for hire went through his rituals as quickly as was socially acceptable. But as he was delivering his final words over Grandma's coffin, the birds and insects of Forest Lawn went abruptly silent. I felt the silence more than I heard it, but I sensed instantly that something was off, and something else was imminent. And just as that anticipation hit, the sky's light dimmed and the air dulled. We had been plunged midday into dusk. During the next few seconds, my ears started to ring, or rather hum. My heart raced, and I gasped. Then I fainted, My knees gave out and I tumbled to the ground. I toppled just inches from the open grave, my left arm dangling over the side. I quickly recovered, but when I opened my eyes, the world was tinged with red and the air that swirled around me was frigid. I could hear murmurs of concern and felt someone touching my back. Embarrassed, I struggled to my feet and assured everyone I was fine. And for a time, I fooled myself into believing that I was fine. On the drive home from the cemetery, I heard radio bulletins describing the total solar eclipse that had just occurred in the northern hemisphere. Everything I had experienced during the funeral was unusual, but explainable. A natural phenomenon. Or was it? Was Grandma's funeral occurring at the same time as a rare astronomical event a coincidence? Or had Fortuna influenced the scheduling somehow? What had I seen? What had I felt? Had I felt through that cold wind Grandma's spirit heading for the afterlife? Or was it the stirring of my own sorrow, blowing around me in warning? Or both?